Disclaimer. This video is based on historical records, public reports, and unverified accounts. Some elements are speculative and remain unresolved. Viewer discretion is advised. Christmas Eve, 1945. Fayetteville, West Virginia. The war had ended. Families were healing. And inside the home of George and Jenny Sodder, the scent of pine needles and warm bread floated through the air. The fireplace crackled. Laughter echoed. 10 children, bright, joyful, close-knit, buzzed with excitement for Christmas morning. That night, 5 of them stayed up late. They begged to open presents. Their mother said no, but smiled, letting them sleep in the living room near the tree. Just after midnight, Jenny turned out the lights and climbed the stairs. It would be the last time she ever saw them. At 1 a.m., a strange phone call, a woman's voice asking for someone Jenny didn't know. Laughter, clinking glasses in the background. Then the line went dead. By 1:30, the house was on fire. Flames roared up the staircase. Smoke thickened the air. George and Jenny scrambled to get the children out. 4 escaped. But 5, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny Jr., and Betty, were trapped. George broke windows. He screamed their names. He tried to drive his truck to the second floor, but it wouldn't start. The ladder that always leaned against the house? Gone. Water barrels? Frozen solid. In just 45 minutes, the Sodder home burned to the ground. But when the ash cooled, there were no remains, no bones, no teeth, no evidence that the 5 children had ever died in the fire. And so the questions began. Was it just a tragedy? Or something far darker? Had the Sodder children died that night? Or had they been taken? This is not just the story of a fire. It's the story of a mystery that refused to die. Because 5 children went to bed on Christmas Eve and were never seen again. December 24th, 1945, Christmas Eve in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family home was warm and bustling. George and Jenny Sodder, Italian immigrants who had built a life through hard work and perseverance, were surrounded by 9 of their 10 children. The oldest son, Joe, was away in the army. But the others were home, filling the house with laughter. That night, the younger children begged to stay up late, playing with new toys and basking in the glow of the Christmas tree. Jenny eventually agreed, asking them to turn off the lights and lock the door when they went to bed. She went upstairs. Everything seemed fine. Then, at 12:30 a.m., the phone rang. Jenny answered. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, slightly slurred, asked for someone Jenny didn't know. Behind her, strange laughter, clinking glasses, and what sounded like a party. When Jenny told her she had the wrong number, the woman laughed again. Then silence. Click. Jenny returned to bed, unsettled. But moments later, she noticed something odd. The lights were still on. The front door was unlocked. The curtains hadn't been drawn. She assumed the children had forgotten, tidied up, and went back to sleep. At 1 a.m., she heard something hit the roof, a sharp, loud thud, followed by a rolling sound, then quiet. By 1:30 a.m., smoke was creeping into the upstairs hallway. Flames erupted from the walls. George and Jenny rushed to wake the children. 4 made it out: Sylvia, Marion, John, and George Jr. But the other 5 were gone. George smashed a window to re-enter the burning house, slicing open his arm. He tried to reach the children's upstairs bedroom, but the staircase was engulfed. He ran outside to grab the ladder, always propped against the house. It was missing. He ran to start his trucks to climb to the window. Both refused to start, though they had worked the day before. He tried the water barrel. Frozen solid. Within 45 minutes, the entire house collapsed into smoldering ash. And when firefighters arrived hours later, delayed and undermanned, there was nothing to save, and no sign of the missing children. No bones, no remains, no explanation. Only silence. And a mystery that had just begun. In the aftermath of the fire, what should have been a time for grief became something stranger and far more unsettling. Because when the ashes cooled, nothing was there. No bones, no skulls, no remains. 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder, had supposedly perished in the blaze. Yet after sifting through the rubble, firefighters and authorities found nothing, not a single trace. It didn't make sense. Even in the most intense house fires, human bones typically survive. Experts agree. It takes crematorium-level temperatures sustained for hours to reduce bodies to ash. The Sodder fire had lasted barely 45 minutes, and yet no remains, no teeth, no fragments. The fire chief offered an explanation. Perhaps the fire had been hot enough to completely destroy the children. Jenny didn't believe it, and to test the theory, she began her own haunting experiments. She burned animal bones in ovens. She contacted crematoriums. The results were always the same. Bones do not vanish like that. Then came the inconsistencies. The fire was ruled electrical, but George had recently rewired the house. The power had been working. The Christmas lights were still glowing after the fire had begun. Why? Witnesses contradicted each other. Some claimed they heard screams, others didn't. One said he saw a man tossing what looked like fireballs onto the roof. Another said the fire started in 2 separate places, odd for an accidental electrical fire. The latter, always placed against the house, was found hidden in a ditch 75 feet away. The phone line? Cut, not burned. And then there was the response. The fire department arrived 7 hours later. They claimed a lack of manpower. The investigation? Minimal. No serious forensics, no preserved evidence, no official autopsies. Within days, officials declared the children dead. Closed case. But George and Jenny couldn't accept it. Their children had vanished without a trace. And the fire, instead of answering anything, only deepened the mystery. The question now wasn't just how the fire started. It was, did the children ever really die in the fire at all? As days turned to weeks, the Sodders were left with no graves to visit. Just questions, and a growing list of theories, each more unsettling than the last. At the heart of it all was one unshakable belief. The children didn't die in the fire. If that was true, then what happened to them? One theory came quickly. Arson. The cut phone lines, the missing ladder, the delayed fire department, the mysterious thumps heard on the roof before the blaze. Some believed it was a carefully planned act, not a tragic accident. But if so, who set the fire, and why? Then came something more disturbing. Abduction. Jenny received strange calls. George heard rumors. One woman claimed she saw the children watching the fire from a passing car. Another said she saw them the next morning at a rest stop, with unfamiliar adults. Over the years, more sightings came in. A woman at a Charleston hotel said she saw 4 of the children with 2 men and 2 women. A waitress claimed they stopped at her diner, seemed dazed, and didn't speak. A letter arrived, supposedly from Louis Sodder, now a grown man, living in New York. It included a photo. George believed it instantly. The FBI said it was inconclusive. Still, the rumors persisted, because there was motive. George Sodder had made enemies. An outspoken man, he was fiercely anti-Mussolini in a tight-knit Italian-American community, a stance that angered some. He received threats before the fire. One insurance salesman told him chillingly, "Your house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." Was this political, personal, or something darker? Some pointed to the Mafia. The idea, the Sodder children were taken, either as retaliation for George's views or for leverage, kidnapped, trafficked, and forced into silence. The lack of remains, the odd sightings, the eerie photo, it all fed into the belief that the children were alive. somewhere. And what about the FBI? In 1947, George and Jenny contacted J. Edgar Hoover himself. Hoover responded, saying he'd help if the local authorities gave permission. But the Fayetteville police refused. Why? That refusal sparked another theory: cover-up. Some believed local law enforcement knew more than they let on, or had been pressured into silence. Corruption, incompetence, or something more coordinated? Of course, not every theory held weight. Some claimed the children were abducted by a childless couple. Others said they ran away, a stretch, considering the youngest was 5. Fringe theorists even suggested government experiments or alien abduction. But in the middle of all the noise, the Sodders clung to one thing: hope. They kept a billboard along Route 16 with their children's faces and a $5,000 reward. They hired private investigators. They chased every lead, every rumor, every whisper, for decades. Because until proven otherwise, they believed their children were alive. And if that was true, someone out there knew what happened. Along Route 16 in Fayetteville, West Virginia, there stood a sign unlike any other, faded by sun and weather, yet impossible to ignore. A massive roadside billboard with 5 solemn faces, names, and a haunting plea. What was their fate? Kidnapped, murdered, or still alive? It was erected by George and Jenny Sodder, and for decades, it refused to let the world forget. The billboard became both a memorial and a message, to the public, to the authorities, and perhaps even to the children themselves, if they were out there. It offered a reward, issued accusations, and chronicled every strange detail the Sodders had uncovered. Drivers from all over the country saw it. Some stopped. Others wrote letters. A few shared stories they thought might help. This wasn't just a sign. It was a symbol of grief that refused to settle. George and Jenny turned their home into a command center. They fielded phone calls, collected tips, hired private investigators who traveled as far as St. Louis and Oklahoma, chasing shadows of the missing 5. Some witnesses described seeing children who resembled the Sodders. Others claimed to have overheard confessions or seen strange activity on the night of the fire. And then came the photograph. In 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, Jenny received a letter. It had no return address, postmarked from Kentucky. Inside was a single photograph of a young man in his 20s. On the back, in barely legible handwriting, Louis Sodder. I love Brother Frankie. Lil Boys. A90132 or 35. George and Jenny were stunned. The man in the photo bore a striking resemblance to their son Louis. Same eyes, same strong jaw, same crooked smile. A forensic artist later confirmed the similarities were compelling. But who sent it? And what did the message mean? The Sodders hired another private detective to track the lead in Kentucky. He took the case, left for the town listed on the postmark. He was never heard from again. The Sodders, once again, were left with nothing but questions. Still, they refused to give up. Jenny, always in mourning black, kept the photo on her mantle. George continued maintaining the billboard. Until his death in 1969, he told everyone who would listen, "Someone knows what happened, and we're going to find out." The billboard stood tall until the late 1980s, long after both parents had passed. Their remaining children eventually took it down, not because they stopped believing, but because time, too, had moved on. But that photo, that face, remained. Like everything in this mystery, it raised more questions than it answered. Was it real? A cruel hoax? Or a cry for help from someone who couldn't speak openly? The trail had gone cold. But the flame, somehow, still flickered. Because in the ashes of that Christmas Eve, the Sodders built something stronger than fire. They built a legacy of unrelenting belief. As the years stretched on, the town of Fayetteville moved forward. Shops changed hands. Families came and went. New memories replaced old ones. But not for the Sodders. Inside their home, Time stood still. Jenny never stopped wearing black. Not once. For her, mourning wasn't a phase. It was a permanent state of being, stitched into every dress, every quiet breath, every prayer whispered into the dark. George grew quieter, more withdrawn. He still took calls, still followed leads, but his hope was no longer loud and defiant. It had turned inward, steeled, worn. Grief, after all, is not just sadness. It's exhaustion with no finish line. The once busy home, filled with 9 children's laughter, echoed now with silence. Their surviving siblings grew up surrounded by half-healed wounds. The billboard loomed large in their lives, as did the burden of a mystery no one could solve. Strangers and tourists came and went. Some left flowers, others left theories. But the world was changing, and with it, so too did public interest. By the 1970s, the story of the Sodder children had become folklore, a chilling local tale shared on stormy nights. But for the family, it was never just a story. It was their lives. And they never stopped believing. Jenny held on to the photograph mailed from Kentucky until the day she died in 1989. She kept it framed beside her bed, the last face she saw before sleep, the last question she asked the universe each night. Could it be him? After Jenny passed, the family finally took down the billboard. The road that once carried their hope and heartbreak now stood bare, but their belief never truly faded. Even today, some of the Sodder descendants still seek answers. Still wonder what happened that cold December night. Still believe, quietly, stubbornly, that the 5 children who vanished may have lived long, secret lives somewhere. Because when the evidence runs out and the witnesses go silent, grief becomes the only thing that refuses to disappear. The house is gone. The billboard is gone. George and Jenny are long buried, side by side beneath the West Virginia soil. But the mystery, it never left. To this day, the disappearance of the Sodder children remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in American history. 5 children, no bodies, no answers, just a burned house and 1,000 questions. How does a fire burn so hot it leaves no trace of human remains, yet barely scorches furniture? Who made the phone call that night? Why was the ladder moved? Why did the truck engines fail? Both of them. And what about the man watching the children from his parked car days before? Was he a scout or something else? Some say it was a kidnapping, planned down to the last spark. Others blame the Mafia, pointing to George's strong political beliefs and refusal to back down. Then there are those who think the truth was buried deeper, hidden under layers of fear, silence, and time. We may never know what truly happened on that cold Christmas Eve in 1945. But one thing is certain. The fire may have gone out, but the mystery still burns. What do you think happened to the Sodder children? Drop your theory in the comments. We read every single one. And if you love dark history, subscribe to Minds Behind History for more untold stories that refuse to fade.